Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. And welcome to our talk today. This is part of our series on Martin Luther King today, people who embody the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr., who are doing things that liven life, that give representation to different fields that aren't represented always. And today I have somebody very special, Mr. Jeremi Най, who is the DCM in the Marshall Islands. He is a man of many talents. He is a foreign service officer, and he is also a chef, like a culinary expert. And my first assignment was in the Dominican Republic, and so was Jeremiah's, and we were neighbors. And I remember fondly on Sundays, Jeremiah always made this huge, big meal. I can't call it a brunch. It's like a huge extravaganza. And you were lucky if you got invited to Jeremiah's house for Sunday brunch. And that was many years ago. And since then, he has served all around the world, in Juba, in Pakistan, in Latin America, on the African continent, and you're everywhere. And so now he is the DCM, Deputy Chief of Mission, the #2 in the Marshall Islands. So I also want to welcome, watching us today, people out in the Marshall Islands are joining us with our friends here in Russia. And we're going to talk to Jeremiah. We're going to learn all his trade secrets. We can become chefs. We're going to learn about his history and his past. You know, he represents the U.S. like I'm from the U.S. and he has a Caribbean background. So he's going to tell us a little bit about that. His family's from Jamaica. What does that mean in the U.S.? What does that mean for his culinary life? You know, what details did he pick up from everywhere? He's got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I know he's traveled and picked up things. He's working on a book that you can get soon. It's just going to be a great talk. So let's start off with one question from me, and then we'll get to the questions from the audience. My first question is, when Jeremiah and I were neighbors, we both had these little tiny grass plots in the front of our house. And one day Jeremiah tore all his grass out and he put all these different herbs and spices. And we were both in our early 20s, and I had never seen someone plant so many herbs and use them. Like I was like, I'm going to put some flowers here and try not to kill them. But he had like row after row of all these exotic looking things, and he cut them every day and he put them in food. So I just want to start off and saying, Jeremiah, have you already started planting your herb garden in the Marshall Islands, where you are now?
That was quite an introduction, first of all. And guess what? Today, I just scoped out the plot where I'm going to plant my garden.
Awesome.
So, I mean, the background about that garden stuff is that growing up, my grandparents had a huge backyard, and they grew everything. So, you know, vegetables, herbs, fruit trees, you name it. We would just go in the backyard and get it. So I was used to that type of situation where I was constantly eating fresh ingredients. So of course, if I get a front yard where I'm living, I'm going to plant some herbs and not flowers so I can use them when I'm cooking, because food tastes better when you use fresh ingredients.
Great. Awesome. That's our first lesson, everyone. Food tastes better when you use fresh ingredients. Awesome. Write that down. Okay, so my first question from the audience is, how did you become a diplomat? And then how are you able to be like a diplomat and a chef? How are you able to combine these two activities, your two passions?
How did I become a diplomat? Wow. That I didn't plan to become a diplomat, to be honest. I was going to do marketing and business, but I had an opportunity to learn more about the foreign service and do internships and the likes, and pass the exam, and then I became a diplomat. I don't think that diplomacy and food are separate from each other. I've always wanted to cook. I actually wanted to go to school to be a chef. But here we have the topic, culinary diplomacy. And how do you mesh those two? I think that you don't have to always give up on what you're passionate about. Some people are lucky where their passion is what they do every single day of their life. I mean, that's some people are musicians or artists or whatever, and that's what they, you know, I love doing my job, but my passion was cooking, which I think that you could marry both of the two. And culinary diplomacy is an important part of diplomacy. And I just made a point that, yeah, I didn't go to school for culinary arts, but I started studying about it and doing my culinary travels through food on Sundays, as you explained.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, it's possible to combine those two passions. You know, you can, and you're lucky if you can do, what you love. And then if you can take what you love and put it in what you do, like what Jeremiah is doing right now, talking to us, and very busy. I should mention, I said good morning at the top, but Jeremiah is after good evening. You know, he's taking off some time in his evening to speak to us. So I'm very happy about that.
So we have a question. Do you believe that every nation has their own dish and character?
Of course, every single nation, because of the history of the country, influences from outside, and then influences from indigenous uh, foods and herbs and the likes, all make up a character of a nation. Like, I'm living in a country that's a small country that's in the middle of the ocean and surrounded by water. And guess what? Fish is an important part of their lifestyle, that lifestyle and their diets. Here it's tropical, so guess what? Coconuts are always available to have. So that's just part of what the so yeah, I think that every country, its makeup, no country is like a carbon copy of another one. I think that, as far as even culture goes, and food is a definite important part of what culture is.
That's a good point. And even sometimes in a country, there's multiple different cultures and multiple different like foods. So for example, I know Jeremiah went to Morehouse, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. Wait, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I had a brain freeze for a moment, everyone. Sorry. So it's a historically Black university that's in the southern part of the U.S. And could you tell us one dish you think the southern part of the U.S. is famous for?
One dish that I think the southern shrimp and grits.
Right. Jeremiah makes really good shrimp and grits too.
And so, I was telling people, what I've been doing recently, well, we'll talk about that later, but, I've been trying to really recapture my New England heritage because I grew up in the North, New England. And so
that's right.
And so it's a lots of seafood, it's lots of squash, but also it's a lot of Native American food that was mixed into the immigrants that came from England and the likes. So I have a cookbook that is a Connecticut cookbook, and I've been trying to cook from that cookbook quite a bit lately.
Nice. So you have those flavors from the southern part when you went to college, but you also have your upbringing in the north part of the U.S., which has, like you said, the chowders and the squashes and the winter vegetables, and then you also have the influence from the Caribbean from your grandparents, all mixed together.
Yeah, so I have my Jamaican, so I have a Caribbean background, so you got one of the biggest things I also say about the kitchen is that you can experiment, even if you're, for instance, from Russia and you know how to make your borscht. That doesn't mean that you have to make it exactly the way that your grandma made it. You can actually use your experiences from around the world and your travels and incorporate it into your local cuisine. So I take all of my backgrounds that I have and I make my food my way and make it my own. And that's the good thing about culinary diplomacy is that you're sharing your background, but also a space to mesh and mix and literally make a melting pot of cultures.
Awesome. Speaking of pots, we have a question about your favorite dish. What is your favorite dish that can be cooked in less than 30 minutes with only 5 ingredients?
That sounds like a game show. That sounds like a game show, like Netflix, like Cook Top Chef. Go, Jeremiah. 5 ingredients. Go.
Since you know me so well, what do I make in less than 30 minutes that only
have 5? I don't know. Maybe a drink. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think there's a 30-minute process for, because that's because the person who asked this question, you understand, in his kitchen, he's chopping things and he's blending things and he's tasting it and he's changing it and he's moving it. Don't touch that. You just got to watch. You can't touch things in the kitchen in Jeremiah. So 5 ingredients, probably you could do 5 ingredients, but 30 minutes.
I don't even know that. Well, okay, put like this. Perfect example. I'm learning how to make local Marshallese sashimi because they have such fresh tuna here. It doesn't require cooking, actually. So you would take fresh tuna cut up in nice little thin slices, along with some soy sauce, a little bit of ginger, garlic, and sea salt, and then you would have sashimi.
Wow, there you go. You did it. Less than 30 minutes, 5 ingredients, sashimi. I don't know if we're making that here in Moscow anytime soon, but yes. All right, so then there's a question about what are your favorite condiments or spices?
So those are 2 different questions, right?
Right.
Condiments and spices. Overall, I don't like condiments. So here's
people who can't cook. People like us who can't cook, who just smother it on top and hope that, I heat some meat up and put some sauce on top. Here you go.
So that's the problem. like condiments cover the flavor of food. I don't really like them that much. I like to for people to appreciate the food because you use spices and seasonings. So I mean, if you are this, the condiment should like highlight the food and not mask it. But I'm not really big on doing a whole bunch of condiments on my. I like a really good maybe French Dijon mustard, like that's using that maybe a little bit. But I don't like relish. I don't like mayonnaise. I don't like ketchup. I don't like all that kind of stuff. My favorite 5 ingredients that I use, of course, I'm a garlic freak. I love garlic. I love cilantro a lot. I am a salt freak, so I use different types of salt, like black salt, sea salt, clay salt, French gray salt. Like, I mean, I think salts are really important and utilizing them properly. I love saffron. I love using saffron quite a bit. And I don't know. It's 5. Oh, I love fresh vanilla beans.
Oh. Okay, so you said we should all use ketchup. Not joking.
Yes.
Yeah. No. So I have a question about your fresh spices. And what you just said. So salt, this sea salt, this gray salt and black salt and clay salt, do they actually taste different? If you were if you were tested with a blindfold, could you pick out the different salts?
I couldn't say, oh, this one is that one or that one, but I know that there will be different ones because some of them are more salty. More salt that's more salty. And then some of them have like the lava salt, it has a more charcoal taste, so like you would use it for more like seafood and stuff like that. The earthy reddish type of clay salts are more for like grilling and like using on meats, like a more hearty feel to it. So there's differences in the salts.
Do you use the white kind of table salt that comes in the big Morton big container? Do you ever use that or?
That's for the rest of us. No, you use like special salts that you measure with a little spoon or something, right? You don't just go like that with the salt. All right. Speaking of salt and measuring and different things, someone asked about encouraging kids to eat. Like, so you don't want to just throw in sugar and salt to make them eat, but do you have any suggestions on how people can encourage children to eat good food?
You do what my grandmother and my mom did to me, is you invite them into the kitchen at a very young age. So like, kids are more apt to eat something if they were part of that cooking process, right? Even if it's vegetables or things they necessarily don't like, if they made it with their own hands, they're more likely to actually eat it than if you sat there and prepared it for them and told them to eat it. So I think that, if there are difficult foods that you think that your child won't want to eat, invite them into the kitchen and let them be part of the cooking process with you. And then you'll see that they'll be more open because I grew up eating loads and loads of vegetables because that was what they had me cooking when I started cooking.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So if you want them to eat more, have them part of the process, give them some responsibility, bring them in the kitchen, make them love the cooking and love the food. They have a lot of cookbooks for kids and activities. So that's a good point. So we're doing this series. We're talking to different people from the U.S. who represent different cultures, different backgrounds. We had a hiker on last week who's hiking all around the U.S. and cycling and doing things at his North Carolina neighborhood. People weren't doing it before. And so I want to ask you, as you've traveled to different parts of the world, have you done anything you think, I'm one of the first of this kind, I'm one of the first doing this, I'm taking this back, I'm going to share this experience with the rest of America or people from my hometown that might not have this experience?
So, so that's what I use the kitchen, it's like you're saying, Sunday dinners for. So like when I go back home, I like to bring dishes that I've learned from different places that I've traveled to and share them in a platform of a Sunday dinner and explain to them the background on it. And it gives me an opportunity to share different cultures. That's what all culinary diplomacy is about. So share different cultures the funniest one was like, I went to Atlanta and a lot of my Jamaican family lives in Atlanta. And at that time I was living in Dominican Republic, and island people are funny. Even though you live in the same Caribbean, they all think that they are all completely different. Mm-hmm. So it was my opportunity to share Dominican food and try to show, well, this is some linkages to like almost like Jamaican food and how some things were different. And they were shocked and they were actually appreciative and they enjoyed the meal.
Yeah, I lived in Venezuela, and I remember I showed someone tostones. So I made tostones, and someone said, "How'd you know how to make that?" And I was like, "Oh, that was from the Dominican Republic." I said, "No, this is Venezuelan food." I'm like, "Okay, maybe you guys both have plantains, and you both decided at one point to mash them and fry them. I don't know who did it first." Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, because you all have some of that similar climate in the same area, so maybe you can make the same thing. That's
And just the introduction. So yeah, that's one of the things I like to do. Like you said, since actually I started cooking on Sundays way back in graduate school, because I grew up in a family where food was such a big thing. So on Sundays in my mom's house, in my grandparents' house, my father and mom, we never had Sunday dinners by ourselves. It was always like somebody was invited. So to me, in my mind, like eating on a Sunday was like a time to share with people. And so I just couldn't have a dinner by myself on a Sunday. So I was like, well, let me invite some people from grad school. And I had some cousins that lived in DC and have them over. And then it turned into a tradition, which I carried over into my career, where on Sundays, I just was every Sunday cooking and having people over and exploring food and having people in your kitchen and sharing with you. And that turned into this whole thing.
And speaking of your kitchen, is there one tool in the kitchen you have to have that whenever you go to a new country, you're like, I got to bring this with me. I can't depend on it.
Pilon that I got from the DR, a pestle and mortar that's used to mash up garlic and mix spices. That is to me the best best tool that I could ever have in my kitchen. It's
sorry.
So it's very old school, but I'm actually really old school. I don't like a lot of I think you used to make fun of me about doing a lot of the stuff the old way, but I like to do stuff the old fashioned way. Like I like to whip up my cream myself with my hand. I like to do all that stuff myself.
So you didn't buy like the big machine that chops up your garlic? You chop it up yourself with a knife?
What machine that chops up the garlic?
I think there's a machine you can put garlic in, you push it and it spins it around and chops it up, minces it.
I have a garlic crusher that you put the garlic in, you squeeze it and it crushes it.
No, yeah, I've seen something where the garlic gets cut up for you and you can throw an onion in and it cuts it up. And
you know what I like to do with my garlic is I always like to just put a little salt in the bottom and then garlic and mash it with my pestle and mortar so that it becomes a paste. That's what I like.
So much better than like maybe cutting it. I was going to ask you how you get the garlic smell out your hands, but if you mash it, it doesn't get in as much.
I like the smell of garlic.
Okay. All right. Do you still make like when Jeremiah, when you were sick, Jeremiah also made a special tea for people with like all these kind of herbs and concoctions. So now we're in winter, at least we're winter here. I guess you're not winter there. Do you still make like teas and when people are sick, sore throat?
They all come to me. Like in my last assignment, my whole office would come to me when they were sick for me to make the teas for them to get better.
Right. Well, what was in the tea again? Or is it some kind of special?
Like Thursday was the bitter one that you didn't like that much.
Yeah.
That was one of the ingredients. But there's a number of things in there. I can't share everybody's my secrets.
Oh, okay. All right. So we just have to come over to you. We have to fly all the way over there if we get sick.
Yeah.
The cure for COVID's coming out of your house because you're going to be making it in your kitchen probably. Sorry, that wasn't a good thing to say. I'm not joking.
Let's move on. All right. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat on Facebook or on YouTube, and we will get it. Meanwhile, I will ask Jeremiah another question of my own. So I had the privilege of knowing Jeremiah's grandmother, and I read your bio, and I think I saw that your grandparents were actually the kind of cooked a lot with you, not as much as your mom, right? Like you cooked more with your grandparents, and they, was there ever, because sometimes in the U.S., different parts of the U.S., people will say, oh, kids shouldn't be in the kitchen, or boys shouldn't cook, or girls shouldn't cook, or you shouldn't do this, or you should do that. Did you ever have any problems, like, learning things, picking up things? Did anyone ever tell you to get away? Or did you learn so well that they were like, you're welcome? Or was it like culturally, of course you should be helping, come in the kitchen?
So my mom did her part where she liked to show me the techniques, and she thought I was too young to use knives. And she would just like watch me do this while you wash the dishes and X, Y, Z. And so I would do a lot of watching her, but she didn't know that when I went to grandma's house, grandma gave me a knife, and like at 5, 6, 7 years old, I'm chopping up stuff there. So my grandmother would let me do the practical. So I got both. I learned technique from my mom, and then I learned how to practically do stuff. And you're right, like my granddad was a traditional old school Jamaican guy that thought that his grandson shouldn't be in the kitchen that much. But he changed his mind when he started enjoying my food, and he didn't have a problem with me in the kitchen.
Right, exactly. That's interesting. Okay. Let's I'm waiting for a few more questions. Let's talk a little about Connecticut. And I have this vision of Connecticut, northern part of the US. I think about lobsters and I think about like biscuits and lobsters. Is that wrong? Am I combining biscuits from the South? Are there no biscuits in the North?
So there are lobster rolls in Connecticut, which are
right.
really
That's like a hot dog, right? Okay. Hot dog roll, right? No. Okay, explain to me a typical Connecticut dish then, okay, please. Because clearly I don't know.
So, a lobster roll is very New England. Like, it's a roll, not a hot dog roll that has the lobster. I like it the traditional way. Like some people have the hot dog, the lobster, and like this kind of like warm, like mayo type of thing. I don't like that. I like it the traditional way, with just really fresh lobster with some lemon juice, and melted clarified butter, and put it on the roll. And like the New England, northern lobsters are sweet by themselves, and you don't have to do a whole bunch with it. That's one dish. I mean, another thing I like is the white clam pizzas. That's from New England. So like, white clam pizzas, you don't have a tomato-based sauce. It's more about like the cheeses, olive oil, garlic, oregano, and then you have the clams put on there. And I mean, those are really, really good. And then, I actually put in my Instagram account, Indian pudding, which is very New England. It's a pudding that was made back in the early part of the making of the colonial times in the U.S., where they used the corn from the Native Americans, and they used molasses to make this pudding that you would bake slowly in the oven, and it had like hearty flavors like nutmeg and and cinnamon inside of it, and heavy cream. And it's a very hearty, like before you had the instant puddings of today, though that was like a pudding that's super typical of where I'm from. And I heard actually is making a comeback now and like New England kitchens.
Wow. Yeah, so that's nice. We got a little gastronomical tour of the US of what they have typically in the New England kitchens. Thank you. And now I am very hungry. All right, so I don't see any new questions, but I'm going to keep asking them. I'm going to give you guys like 5 more minutes to ask questions. You have to hurry because Jeremiah has to go, and we only have him from this limited time. Can they find you on Instagram? Is it okay? Do you want to share your hand?
No problem. That's no problem. You can share it. I guess you can share. You want me to share it in the chat?
Sure. And meanwhile, we have another question. What quality should a good cook have? So you can ponder on that while you.
So, so a good cook, culinary art is exactly what it is. It's an art, right? So just like, all right, I just shared it by IG account. So culinary art is exactly what it is. It's an art. And I think that like, you have to have intuition, right? So using the cookbooks to give you, cookbooks to me are basically like recipes are a guide. They're not, I don't necessarily follow them 100% because you have to have your intuition on how to learn what flavors mend with what, and then you start experimenting and making up your own recipes on your own. But you have to have good intuition, and you have to have the ability to be open to trying different things. So you're experimenting with food will allow you to become a better cook in the kitchen because you know what flavors to mix with others, and you know what works and what doesn't work. So I think that's really key. So that's what started me on my journey. I am doing all this cooking. So I want to go back to like going after your passions. Like so if cooking is something that you want to do. Like I didn't do cooking for my career, but guess what? I cooked every Sunday. And around 2014, I was still doing these Sunday dinners every Sunday for the last how many years. I was in the Dominican Republic working again. And one of my friends that owns this magazine called Santo Domingo Times, which is it's a socialite magazine, said, "Oh, I heard you do these Sunday dinners all the time, and you never invite me over for these Sunday dinners." And so I said, "Okay, we're gonna invite you over." She was Cuban. She is Cuban, and I knew that she had Nordic heritage, so Scandinavian heritage, and so I decided to make a whole Scandinavian dinner. And I invited her and her friends over. And when I invited them over, she said, hey, I'm doing a special edition to the to the magazine dedicated to food. Would you like to be featured in it? And I was like, me? You're like, I have real chefs. I'm not like a real chef. She said, oh, she gave me a 4-page spread in the magazine. I had joked and said to her, oh, if this becomes a actual magazine itself, I have an idea for a column. And I had this idea for my column, for a column in my mind since 2010, when I was thinking about making a blog about my culinary experiences. Guess what? The magazine was a big hit, and they made it into an actual a culinary magazine. And I pitched my column to them, and that's how I became a columnist for the magazine. And then from that, I was like, wow, I'm writing all these stories about my culinary travels. Why don't I put them together to be an actual cookbook? Or actually, I like to call it a gastronomic memoir, because it's not necessarily a cookbook. But so that all comes into like, there's an idea that you need to spend 10% of your time going after your passions until it gets to the point where that 10% overtakes the 90%, and it becomes a viable lifestyle for you. And so even if you're doing things free, like no one paid me to write for the magazine. To this day, they don't pay me to write for the magazine. Why do I do it? Because it gives me exposure. It gives me ability to do something I love, which is write about food. So not everything has to bring you money right away. But the cool thing about it is because I wrote for the magazine, I started getting invited to food-related events. People started looking at me as a person that knew about food, and then other people started following me on social media because of it. And this whole food thing came under play. So whatever your passion is, whether it's food or whether it's art or whether it's writing, literature, I mean, go after what you would love to do, even if your career itself is not necessarily like that. So even writing my cookbook, I dedicated an hour and a half a day, every single day, to sit down and write. And that brought me to over a 300-page book now that's being edited.
Wow. We don't have more questions, but the good news is that everything you just said was like the perfect way to close out. Jeremiah just told us to go after our passions, to spend 10% of our day until we get to the point where we're spending 90% of our day, an hour and a half committed every day to his passion. That's amazing. I mean, obviously, the passion of diplomacy, of traveling, of meeting new people, of bringing, of making partnerships between the U.S. and the country you're in is a passion, but also your other passion is food. And he spent time working on it. A lot of us have this idea and we just keep it in the back of our mind, or we think about it and we're like, oh, one day I'll get to this. I'm too busy now. But you have an hour and a half to Netflix probably. You have an hour and a half of a commute home. You have an hour and a half of nonsense. You can take that hour and a half and make it productive and actually work on your passion. Like Jeremiah just said, writing every day. If we could all do an hour and a half, we could all do a half an hour and then go up to an hour and a half, then we would get where we want to be. And so that person wanted to know about causes of being a good cook. You heard it. It's the passion, and it's working hard, and it's trying new things. So I can be a good cook too, because right now I'm not a good cook according to my kids, but I can be one if I work on it. Or I could just wait until Jeremiah has a delivery business, and I would just order meals from the Jeremiah's company, and I'll just pretend like it's mine. But for now, thank you so much, Jeremiah, for joining us. Follow him on Instagram if you can, if you want. It's at Jerry_Jack, which is at JERRY_JAK. That's on IG. And you will see all of his pictures of what he's eating, what he's making, where he's traveling. It's very visual look. You also see him working out, but that's the other passion. It's been a pleasure, Jeremiah. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for taking out time in your evening to spend some time with us in our morning to help us set our day right. We're all going to go and start cooking our lunch. I don't know what the big meal is where you are, but here I feel like a late lunch is a bigger meal than the dinner. So maybe you have inspired people to go in the kitchen and start using the ginger and the saffron and the different types of salts, and to put the ketchup and mustard away, and to really take time to love our food and enjoy it and make it. There, we have your Instagram up, and you will see, you can follow him, you can check it out. Thank you so much, Jeremiah, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.